Good morning, everybody. Win Daily fam, everyone out there. It's college football Saturday, a big one in Michigan as Texas takes on the national champs Wolverines. We'll get into that and so much more shortly here on the CFB DFS Masterminds. Joel, welcome to another great Saturday of college football. Listen, it's Joel, it's Dave. Last week we gave out a lot of plays. We highlighted them in Discord, and I'm telling you right now, we were talking before the show, we hit on all the major players, all the values. But putting them into a winning lineup was a little bit tough last week because the chalk hit. Joel, what do you feel? Do you just feel it was just one of those Saturdays pricing was a little off?
It was. The pricing was up. It was week one, right? I think, as we get adjusted to the new teams and stars on each team, the pricing is going to adjust accordingly. But I think the issue last week was the pricing was off and the chalk hit. And when the chalk hits, the scores are really high and you have to be so good. So, a typical score last week that I had that normally would have won a lot of money didn't win. So I think that gets adjusted back this week. There's a few game environments this week I really like that we can target. And I'm excited to break it down with you, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely, bud. So before we get into all that, break down each game, 12 of them on the slate today, and hopefully get those screens green this week. I'm feeling really good about this one. Just got to talk real quick some business. Underdog, fantasy. We'll be talking later in the show about some of the picks we like on there. But as you can see, WinDailySports.com, you can sign up with WinDaily100, get up to a $250 deposit match. We're going to scroll a little bonus down there as well about Win Daily Sports in general, $14.99 a week. Get you everything. And with NFL Week 1 starting tomorrow, Joel, I mean, you got to get in. You got to test it out. You got to see sticks. You got to see the optimizers. You got to see the models. It just really, and one of the things that I love using the lineup tools because it helps me build large pools of lineups. Like I do, with you probably, I'll build a 20-man on a sheet of paper. But if I got to build a 150, I need some help in some other areas, and Win Daily has that for you.
Totally. If you're playing every week, which most of us are, you're watching our show, you're going to get an edge. It's going to help you win. This will easily pay itself off over the course of the season. Get involved, get into Discord. You can have a much better season than you typically have.
That's it. And last week, hit on the Penn State Nittany Lions bet. Told you go against West Virginia. Everybody was drinking that Kool-Aid. Last night, hit Duke too. If you guys watch me on another show. So I'm feeling like it's going to ride that hot streak in some bets. So we'll get into those as well later. But let's open it up with this awesome 12-game slate. Joel, I did it very simply. I looked at the totals, and I can tell you right now, there's 5 games over 54 points, and there's about 4 with 41 or under. So there's a large separation here, in my opinion. And those 5 games, 4 of them have really tight point spreads too. So I love that game environment. 3 are over 60. So I think we're going to be similar, but those are the areas I start to trend to right away. I want to be in those game environments, especially the tighter spread ones with the high totals. And then like a game like Iowa State with 35.5, you could have left that one off the board for me.
Well, you'll laugh. I actually am playing a player in that game. We just won, but there's a guy I like. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. But you're right. It's the game environment. I can't stress enough how important that is. I think even more so in college football than in the NFL. Because in these colleges that blow teams out 45, 50 to nothing, 50 to 10, these guys don't play 4 quarters. And it's very hard to reach some of these 300-yard bonuses, 100-yard bonuses if you're not playing the whole game. So when you find these game environments that are supposed to be back and forth, both teams are going to score a lot of points. Those are the ones where you really can find your smash value. So for today, we are going to break that down and get into it. A lot of fun games early. So I think we'll have a lot to talk about on this 12 o'clock portion. The first game we'll dive into is Kansas State and Tulane. This Tulane team, a new quarterback, they're always very competitive. We saw Mekhi Hughes last year, their running back, but this Kansas State team is tough, and they're very good defensively. This is not one of the games that's a top-tier game environment that I want to target, but it is some value that you can play, and there's some guys that I will be rostering from this game. I'll start on the Kansas State side. Avery Johnson played a bit last year as a freshman, didn't start, but he got in the game. He's a highly touted recruit. They are going to want to feature this offense around him. He can run scores in. He can throw with his arm. At 7,500, there's value there. I will be playing Avery Johnson today. He won't be my highest owned quarterback, probably not even my top 3, but he will mix into some of my lineups at 7,500 with the rushing upside. There's a lot to like there. But let's go to DJ Giddens. He's going to come with some ownership. But DJ Giddens at running back is one of my favorite running backs on the slate. They killed the team they played last week. He didn't, have to do that much work. This should be a more competitive game. Last year, we saw games where Giddens would get 25-plus carries. I think the offense will be more balanced this year, but Giddens is an NFL talent. At 6,600, the price is right. He could have a really big game here against Tulane. And I also am really interested in Jace Brown, the number 1 receiver on Kansas State. I think this could be an environment where Tulane is forced to stuff the box and make Kansas State throw. And I think Kansas State wants to show that they're going to be a more balanced attack this year and not be so ground heavy. Jace Brown's going to be their guy at under 5K. He's got a wide receiver 1 upside at a great value. Dave, would love your take on this Kansas State team.
Yeah. I wrote an article before the year about my 12 college football playoff teams over at Bell Ringer Sports and Win Daily Sports. And one of the big things was K-State's one of my sleeper teams of the year. And it's because of Avery Johnson and the coach's but commitment to the run. So with what you said, Avery Johnson is probably a perfect type of GPP play because there's high risk there. He's going to get his points on the ground. He'll throw some through the air, but he's not going to throw your 350, 400 today. He's going to have to get his points through the ground. If he's not getting them through the ground, then he's going to be a low, mid-ceiling type of guy, which is fine. And that's why you play him in GPP. He's an excellent talent. And like you said, there's a reason he's starting this year and Will Howard's up at Ohio State. So understand that. But DJ Giddens is my favorite on the board. K-State typically runs the ball over 55% of the time. DJ Giddens is one of those bell cows, right? He's a guy that's getting 40 to 45% of those carries. And he's the man. And I think in this game environment, I think he's he's in my top 3 running back plays. I really like Giddens. He didn't have to do much last week too, right? I think he went 13 to 124 and played a half. He's going to play 4 quarters today. So this total is not huge, like you said. So I'm not going to get too involved everywhere else, but Giddens is probably my favorite of anyone today on the board for Kansas State.
I'm with you on that. I'm not going to be too exposed to Tulane here. This Kansas State defense is tough. They're a good team. Mekhi Hughes is a good running back, but at 6,300, I think he's a little expensive. I think there's better spots to go. If you wanted to consider a receiver, Mario Williams looked good week 1. He's a transfer from USC. He's a good talent at 5,400. But I think there's probably better spots to find a receiver as well.
I agree, but circle the name Mekhi Hughes. I mean, he's a guy we will use this year. We used him last year. I just don't think today's the day. We kind of talked about that last week in a couple of situations, like Graham Mertz, we said, and some other quarterbacks. The day just wasn't the day for them. Yep. Similar to Mekhi Hughes today, but circle that name.
I'm with you on that.
And listen, Warren checking in, and exactly what I'm feeling. Love Giddens, and he's not sharing any workload either. That's what I'm saying. 40, 50%. They're going to run a ton, and he's going to get 90% of those carries. So, yeah, great point, Warren. I totally agree.
Appreciate you there. Now we get into the fun. Arkansas and Oklahoma State. This is one of my absolute favorite game environments of the day. I am definitely going to want to have exposure to this game. And the place I want to start, the place where I'm excited about is Taylon Green. Taylon Green is a beast. This man is 6'6", and he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest, quarterback in college football. He can run all over the place. Bobby Petrino is orchestrating this offense, and we know what he can do with a running quarterback, i.e. Lamar Jackson. He's going to have a great game plan to make Taylon Green look fantastic. And against this Oklahoma State team, which we know one is going to score points. They can load up the ball. It's going to be a back-and-forth game. And I think Arkansas is going to need Taylon Green to keep them in this game, both with his arm and with his legs. I think he's underpriced here. Taylon Green is definitely my favorite quarterback play of the day, if not my favorite play of the day, period. We'd love to hear your take on that, Dave.
Listen, college football is in my blood, right? I love Boise State. Last year, Taylon Green let me down because I was so Taylon Greened up on Boise State, and it just didn't work. I mean, there were days where he just couldn't get in the right environment. So he found a new home in Arkansas, and they're letting him thrive. And this is the Taylor Green that I've been waiting a year for. Now, listen, it's not like he stunk. He ran over 1,000 yards the last 2 years at Boise State. Like Joel said, he's a big dude and fast. I think it's the perfect recipe for Bobby Petrino. He knows. Listen, Oklahoma State can be in the air and on the ground. We got Gordon, Bowman. They're very good offensively. What's the best way to slow down a good offensive team? Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Taylor Green had 6 rushes for 88 yards last week. I think you're going to see upwards of 12 to 15 carries from him. I'm with you. If he's not my favorite, he's 1B. Like, he's right there. I got one other or two, but he's definitely my top 3 quarterbacks.
I love it. I'm also interested in Jaquindon Jackson. He's a transfer from Utah. He started at Utah last year. He looked to be the running back this year. They had a blowout last week, so we don't know what the real usage will look like. I think he only had like 8 carries last week. But again, the game wasn't close. They didn't need him. This will be a much more competitive game. He is a very talented back. The reason I'm interested is if we love this game environment and he's the starting running back and he's only 5,200, that is too cheap. So that is a great price tag for a guy who can easily break the ceiling at a $5,200 price tag.
And by the way, how smart is he? Like, Utah handed the ball to 6 different running backs last night. He's like, yo, I'm getting out of town and I'm actually going to show my talents. Like, Jaquindon Jackson's really good. He just didn't get a chance. And he exploded here or there. But, I think he's going to be the main guy. And 5,200, you're right. It's like LaQuint Allen last week. It's way underpriced.
It's under. And the difference with this is he's also not carrying a ton of ownership. It's not like, Allen last week was the highest owned running back on the slate. There's some other spots people are going to go to. So you can get Jackson and you don't have to get him at a super chalk ownership. On the receiver side, the guy I want to pair with Green the most, and this one's going to be maybe a little surprising, is tight end Luke Haas. I think people forgot Luke Haas was a freshman last year, and he was good. He had a few big games. This is a spot where I think they're going to need him to be involved. They're going to need to get some points in the air. He's only 3,300 at near minimum price. I think you can get a lot of upside with Luke Haas. And the kicker that everyone might not be aware of is Luke Haas is from this area. He's going to play at home. So they're going to want to get him the ball. This is going to mean more to him. I think there might be a little extra motivation to get him involved because he's coming home to play at Oklahoma State. A super talented kid at 3,300. I think this is my favorite value play of the day as well.
It's so funny. I got one guy circled, below 4K, and it's Luke Haas as well. So we didn't talk before this. I agree with everything you said. Talented tight end. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Sam Laporta, who came out of Iowa a couple years ago. Big, fast, physical. So, I think at this price and in this game environment, he's a perfect type of GPP smash play. So, love it.
I love it. All right, Dave, I'll let you lead us on the Oklahoma State side. Who are you targeting for Oklahoma State?
Well, it gets tricky, Joel, because with Oklahoma State, I feel like you got to be one or two ways. Last week, Ollie Gordon was in the lineups that won, the big prize in the $20 lineup. Looking back, there was no other Oklahoma State player in that lineup. So how do you want to play this? It depends. To me, you either go after the rushing side or the receiving side. You can maybe blend both, but if you go after rushing and receiving, you're not going to get the quarterback. So I'm going to name a bunch of players because I feel like they're all in play. But you're going to have to balance them out. I think Alec Bowman still is in play. 8,400 is a little high, but Allen, not Alec. But at this rate and pace, and Arkansas's pass defense isn't great, I think Bowman could be a very good play. So he's in play for me. Obviously, the big one, Gordon. I don't have to go over that too much with you guys. Big there. Presley at receiver is 7K. Obviously, we like him, but there's, I think, a little bit other value here. Let's go down to 4,800 and look at Stribling. Stribling had a decent week last week, a lot of targets. I think he was 9 targets almost. And at 4,800, if they're going to mix the ball around, he's my favorite play on the Oklahoma State side. So again, I don't need to teach you big names, but DeZalin Stribling is one guy I'm circling on Oklahoma State.
You hit the nail on the head. I think the one thing that's unique about Oklahoma State, for those of you who maybe don't watch every single week, they run such a fast pace. They run so many plays that they're one of the few teams in college football that can afford to have 3 valuable receivers. Most teams don't run enough plays to have 3 receivers that you can play, but Oklahoma State plays so fast. They run so many plays. They score so many points that you can have 3 receivers that could all be valuable on that team. And this is one of the few teams that has that luxury. And to Dave's point, Stribling, who is very involved in this offense, at only 4,800 seems too cheap, right? So I do think one of these receivers is going to, have a big day. Stribling will be one I'll be going to often, simply because he's, in my mind, pretty much equally as involved. Presley's the leader by a smaller margin than the price shows, and the other two are right there. To get at 4,800, there's plenty of upside with that price tag.
Yeah, so in this game environment, I could see myself pairing Stribling with like Owens and then running it back with, Green naked, or pair him up with Haas or someone else over there. Maybe Jaquinda. I'm not even scared of putting Green with Jackson. I'm okay with that. If I'm going to go Presley, I feel like I might run him solo. I think for him to hit at 7,000, I don't need him sharing. So it'll be interesting the way my lineups are built, but they're all in play. They are. It's just how I'm going to mix them together.
Exactly. All right. Let's move over to this Michigan-Texas game. This will be a fun game to watch. This is probably the game of the day in terms of watching, but not for fantasy, right? Just because it's a good game doesn't mean we need to force the players in for fantasy purposes. To be honest with you, I'm actually going to full fade this game. I don't think I have any exposure to anyone on this game. Michigan's a good defensive team. They're unproven offensively. I don't know what their offense is going to look like. I do prefer Texas's offense, but Michigan is not the team I want to target. Jaden Blue at 6,800. There's other running backs I prefer that have a better matchup. Quinn Ewers at 9K again. I think we can just find better matchups on the slate. So for me, exciting game to watch, but a fade for fantasy.
Yeah, 41.5 puts them right down near the Iowa game. So it's on the very low end, and it's just the prices are too high. I'd be willing to dip. I'm not paying 8,800 for Edwards. I'm not paying 6,800 for Blue against Michigan. And even the one I really love, and I've always loved him, and now he's getting the notoriety, is Loveland. But as the tight end up at 6,700, I can't play 6,700. He's a guy I think could get you to 18, 20 points today, just because in those types of environments, tight end catching the ball, I think he could have some volume. But 6,700, I just can't do it. So I'm with you. I'm probably fading most of this game.
But I'll even add to that, Dave, even if you get 20 points at 6,700, it's not enough.
It's not good. It's not. And not when we're going to start talking about, we've talked about Stribling already. For him to get to what Loveland would need to get, Stribling needs 14.
Exactly.
Where Loveland would need 2021. So it's a huge difference.
To your point, I think Stribling and Loveland have equal upside. And Stribling is 2K less. So I'll just go with Stribling and then move upside. So very good point there. Let's move over. One of the other super exciting game environments that I want to target today is Pitt at Cincinnati. We saw Pitt come out last week under new offensive coordinator and run a very fast-paced offense. They look good against an inferior opponent. It will be a step up in competition. But this is not a Cincinnati defense of old that, had Sauce Gardner and all those guys. This Cincinnati defense is beatable. And the positive thing in terms of the game environment is the Cincinnati offense looks much improved. And I'm intrigued by what this Cincinnati offense looks like, especially with transfer quarterback Brendan Sorsby, who can get it done both with his arm and with his legs against the Pittsburgh defense that last week showed there's some question marks. Are they able to get stops? And now it's a step up in competition. I am actually more giddy about this Cincinnati offense today and what they're going to be able to do against Pittsburgh in a really fast game environment. Brandon Sorsby is going to be one of my highest owned quarterbacks. Like I said, we want these dual threat quarterbacks that can get it done with their arm, with their legs. He can certainly do that. I think this Pittsburgh defense is not good, and they're going to find ways to score a lot of points. I think Corey Kiner is also very much so in play at 5,700, under 6K. He's very affordable. You can run on Pittsburgh. He's their best running back by a good margin. I'll look to get him involved in my lineups. But Xavier Henderson is the go-to receiver. He's a transfer from Florida. This is his second year at Cincinnati. They're going to pepper him with targets in this game. I think he's due for a big day. Again, if we're paying 6,500, I much prefer Xavier Henderson with the upside he'll have in a very positive game script. And another value play I'm very interested in is Joe Royer, a transfer from Ohio State who's playing tight end. He's more like a receiver than a tight end. He's 6'7", huge target. Came out of the gates in week 1 and had a big day. I think he had 5 catches for 87 or 89 yards. I think he's a red zone duck at score a touchdown at 3,800. He's very affordable. Another value play that I'm looking to plug into my lineups. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm with you. I really am intrigued by the Cincinnati side. Here's the thing about Sorsby, and you said, dual threat, 5 carries, 5 yards. You'll be like, oh, what are you talking about? 2 of those went for touchdowns. He's going to be their goal line threat. He's a big body. He weighs like 240, 250. He's the guy, not push Jalen Hurts wise, but they want that guy to score down in like a Josh Allen in a way. So yeah, he's going to get, more importantly, the rushes that count, the ones inside the 10 that we've seen already. So definitely a dual threat that I love today as well. I will tell you, I'm going to go and talk about the Pittsburgh side. You're spot on with everything you said on Cincinnati. There's some value in Pittsburgh. I love Holstein. He's going to be one of my favorites today too at 6,500 because of the price and what Pittsburgh showed us last week. We talked about with the new offensive coordinator in tow, they were really way more fast-paced and moving the ball up and down the field and throwing. Holstein had a huge game, 40 attempts against Kent State for 336 yards, 3 TDs. So if we're going to see the throwing volume that Pittsburgh showed last week, I got to get Holstein in for 6,500 against a Bearcats team that you can score against. I mean, this total is 62.5, the highest on the board. And if I'm going to do that, I want to pair them up with 2 of the receivers that popped last week. At 4,500, we got Raphael Williams, had a good week, 4 for 31, but the 2 TDs was huge. But the other one I think I love more is Kenny Johnson, 7 for 105 at 4,400. Mumpfield, we all know, is great. But those 2 can get you home at a cheaper price, almost combine the price. One thing I will say, I loved him last week. You loved him. We knew heard about their star running back is out for the season. Desmond Reed was great, right? But part of that was a kick return or punt return for a touchdown. Part of that was, some long runs. I don't know if that's fully sustainable if they don't really commit to the run tag. Only 14 carries. I'm not as high on him this week as I was last week. Last week, I think what was he, like 4,000? He was pretty cheap from what I remember, 4,600. 5,900 is another big step up. You're going to have to do the same you did last week, if not a little more. So I'm not as high on him as I was last week.
I get that. I totally get that, especially if the ownership creeps up this week because of the big day. I'll add, I actually really like Mumfield this week. I think people are looking to get away from him because he wasn't as good last week. He is still the number 1 guy here.
Yeah.
I think, at only 500 more, I'd like to take this shot of him, separating himself this week and having the big day. 5K is still very affordable for a great game environment. The other name that we didn't mention that I will put out there is Gavin Bartholomew. He's the tight end. Again, we are a tight end show. We are always mentioning tight end here. But he's a big talent. He's a guy that was featured, supposed to be one of the top guys in this offense. In terms of production last week, he was okay. Wasn't the most explosive. But he's going to have some big games this year. This week seems like an opportunity for him to do so at only 4K as well.
Yeah, I agree. But again, and I agree with Mumpfield as well. I think that's a great perspective of maybe he is going to be lower owned because of how he did in week 1. So good point there. Again, this is an environment I'm going to see myself probably up to 4 players in certain games and play a little back and forth, some 1-3s and some 2-2s. But yeah, all these guys are in play. And I think it's 62.5. I go over it again. 3 games over 60. This is the highest. I think it's one we want to really get involved in.
Definitely have some exposure to this game today. The Penn State game, Bowling Green, I can almost skip the whole game entirely. Maybe you want to play a little bit of Penn State because they're going to be in a blowout. But the issue with Penn State is they're running back splitting carries in a game that's not going to be close. I don't know if they're both even going to be playing into the 4th quarter. And the fact that none of them is guaranteed all the volume makes it very difficult to kind of commit to them. So, both are in play because they both could break off big plays and against an inferior opponent. But none of them are like, I need to get exposure to some of these guys because of that, split carry nature. Yeah, I think the guy that's most intriguing to me would be Wallace, who himself as the number 1 receiver at Penn State. But my only concern with that is I just don't see them throwing much in the second half. They're going to have a lead. I don't think this game's going to be close. So if he's not going to need to be involved for 4 quarters, I don't know. It's going to be hard for him to reach his full value. But he'd be the most intriguing play from my end.
For sure. Wallace is a guy I'm circling that I'll play as a one-off. 5,800 I think is well worth a number 1 receiver price versus a bad team. He could get you there in the first half. It's just going to tick you off in the second half if he's not getting any targets and already has 30. But I think I like Wallace. As you said, the running situation is weird, right? I think they're fairly priced, but it's just one I just don't want to get in. I think if you're going to go anywhere, it's Allen at the 5,300. But I don't know how much I'm going to want to get in. And Penn State's very good. We saw that Garrett Green or Green, right? The guy from West Virginia. He was another guy we said we love, but not against Penn State. So same theory here. Nothing on the Bowling Green side. Penn State's got really good defense. If anything, maybe Allen, maybe Wallace, but one-offs.
Agreed. Not a lot of exposure there. All right. Already, the next big game on the slate, another great game environment to be in. I am very interested in this Georgia Tech-Syracuse matchup. We saw Syracuse come out. Kyle McCord looked good last week. Kyle McCord looked much improved. I think this Syracuse offense has a lot of talent around him. I think that's going to be a team that can score points. And we've seen Georgia Tech look good this year. They beat Florida State week 1. They looked good against Georgia State. Haynes King can run the ball. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can throw and run. Jamal Haynes looked really good. And Syracuse looked embarrassingly bad against the run last week. Embarrassingly bad. So I am looking to get Jamal Haynes exposure as much as I can, because if what we saw last week is any indication of what Syracuse run defense is going to look like this week, Jamal Haynes is going to have a field day.
Yeah, I think I circled it. Ohio ran for 262 yards, but more importantly, 6.7 yards per carry. And if Syracuse is going to want to play that fast in the dome, I think this is a great environment for Haynes. I'm with you. I think he's the guy that does get the goal line carries outside of King. So Haynes has been great this year. He's one I love on Georgia Tech. I think Haynes King has to be considered too. Obviously, he has that rushing potential. Went for 14 rushes in week 1 against Florida State. Only had to do 5 last week against Georgia State. But what's interesting is he threw the ball last week and got up to 275 and 2 TDs. So he's kind of that guy. You don't know what you're going to see, but he's able to do it both ways. So I like that. And at receiver at Georgia Tech, you've seen it. So far this year, a little surprising that Singleton hasn't been great, but I still think Singleton is the guy. 5,800, little more than Rutherford, and Rutherford outplayed him, twofold. But I kind of lean towards a big day out of Singleton today. I prefer him with the close price that we see between the two.
I think it's interesting. It's a good point. Singleton historically was the better receiver, right? Coming into the year. And so Rutherford has been featured. He's been the go-to guy for the first 2 weeks. Singleton's big week is coming, right? He didn't just disappear. It's going to come. This could be the week. It's certainly the environment for it. I think it's a good, kind of you zigging while everyone else zags by going with Singleton in this spot. I like both. I think one of them gets there. I think one of them has a good day. It's a matter of which one. But at this price tag, both of them are fairly priced. I will have exposure to one of the two of them in my lineups. On the other side of the ball, they still are underpricing Arande Gadsden. Arande Gadsden is going to be an NFL player. He is one of the best tight ends in the country. They super insanely underpriced him last week at 3,500. Now they got him at 5K. He's still underpriced. He is the number 1 option on this team. They're going to throw to him at least 10 times in this game. He is a red zone target. Arande Gadsden at 5K to me is still underpriced. He's going to be chalky. I still want exposure to him. I will be all over Arande Gadsden this week. And then, at the receivers on this side, I think the only guy I'm really interested in is Trevor Pena. He had a big game last week. He's only 4,900. He does seem to be heavily involved in this offense. And then, of course, LaQuinn Allen. We know LaQuinn Allen is the guy in this offense. They finally priced him accordingly. They throw to him the ball. They'll hand him the ball. He can get there in a variety of ways. Certainly, if you're targeting this game environment, LaQuinn Allen's in play.
Yeah, don't be scared off by LaQuinn Allen jumping up to 7K. I'm with you. Here's one thing that we had known about Georgia Tech last year, and they seemed to have figured it out, but they were terrible against the run. Just bad. They let up, I think it was like 170, something, a lot per game. They were in the bottom third of college football. They kind of resurrected and fixed it this year, but it's also against the Florida State team that we just saw couldn't even run the ball against Boston College. And Georgia State can't run either. So it's I don't think they've been challenged in the run game yet. So don't be scared off. I mean, LaQuint was only 5,100 last week. He jumps to 30%, 40% up to 7,000. I still love him. Like Joel said, he's a ball dominant player for them. He's going to get roughly 20 touches between the passing and running game, which is great.
Boom. Love this game.
All right, hey, there's a good question here. Warren asked, if we had to pick between two, Allen, Giddens, Haynes. It's a great question. Giddens is, I'll say, automatically there. I'm going to say Allen just because Haynes King could steal some of those touchdowns from Haynes, where I don't see that happening on McCord. So I'm going to lean, LaQuint and Giddens. How about you?
It's a tough. I think you can go with all three of them. I'm probably gonna say Giddens and Haynes, but I have them all within a couple points of each other.
Yeah.
So I think all three guys I like. You just got to make some choices at that point.
Yeah, GPP. I'm going to say Allen Giddens. If I got in cash, I like Haynes a little more, especially against that terrible Syracuse rush defense.
Exactly. I mean, I'm picking Haynes because of the terrible defense, but to your point, there's risk with Haynes because of King. So
that's it. Yeah.
You just got to kind of pick your spots. All right, we're going to go to the afternoon games here at 3:30. There's less to like in the afternoon, but there's a few spots to target. We'll start in this Cal-Auburn game. This is a game I'm not going to be heavily involved in. A lot of people are excited about Auburn. They think Peyton Thorne's going to take a step forward this year with a revamped receiving core. I'm going to wait and see. I am not as high on Thorne as people are saying. Cal is a step up in competition. Cal's not an all-time great team, but they're a step up in competition for what we saw from the Auburn play last week. Jaquiz Hunter is their best player, in my opinion. At 6,500, he's fairly priced. He's not someone I'm looking to get overly exposed to, but I might have a few shares of Hunter in my lineups where I can find them. Otherwise, to be honest with you, Jaden Ott's a great player, but at 9,100, that is way too much money to get.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not going to be overly exposed in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, it's funny looking at Cal because we played some of their players like Ott, and even we had some exposure last year in certain games with Mendoza, the quarterback. But the total's 54. It's and the spread's very thin, so it's an intriguing game environment to get in. If I'm going to go anywhere, I think it's going to be more in the passing game. But nobody's really popped yet. But Cal was very good last year passing the ball and getting some points out of the receivers. So if I had to go anywhere, it just depends on health right now. But Grizzle was one guy who used a decent amount last year. So lean that way. And then on the other side, the only real receiver is Lambert Smith, the Penn State transfer. He's getting a little bit more freedom here with a little bit more open environment in Auburn. Popped in week 1, but I mean, it was, a 70-3 game. But I think Keandre Lambert Smith at 64 is worth a couple plays.
I'll put him on your radar as well. Cam Coleman's a 5-star recruit. He's a freshman.
There you go. Yes.
People like him. Again, if you want to take the risk of playing a freshman, I certainly can see the upside because of his talent, but he is young.
Yeah. Hey, there we got a question. Any love for FanDuel? Hey, the big thing about FanDuel today, just a couple different games. All I'll say is Nebraska, Colorado is playing in that game. So one of our favorite quarterbacks, Raiola, obviously Sanders, if you can get in that game environment, there's a lot of trash talking. If you remember what happened last year with Matt Rule and Dion, now they're taking a different approach. So FanDuel, I would like to get in that game. And Milroe's not off the table against USF just because it's the Jaden Milroe for Heisman show. I mean, that's just what it's going to be most of the year. And when they can play bad teams, they're going to go to Milroe a lot. So other than that, there's not a lot of games that are different than what we're talking about. Illinois, Kansas, you could get a little bit in there with Jaden Daniels, obviously. But yeah, those are our big ones. I think that's the big difference. Otherwise, I think we're hitting on most of them here.
All right. South Carolina, Kentucky. This is another game that I'm going to have minimal exposure to. I don't want to. There's not too much here that I love. However, there is one play that I'm very intrigued by, and that's Raheem Sanders, the running back for South Carolina. This is a team that's going to want to run the ball often. He had 24 carries last week. He was previously, close to an All-American. He was definitely an All-Conference player. He is a star. I think he could play on Sundays in his future at only 5,200. I think they've underpriced him. He has plenty of upside. But other than that, I don't think I am looking to get too much exposure to this game. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, it's interesting because Kentucky with Vandergriff, he was like listed up there with the names of like Caleb Williams when he first came out as a recruit. I think he was over at Georgia. And now it's finally getting some room to breathe and show his skill set. And there is one guy that if we want to start dipping down a little bit of value, and it depends if he plays, but read a lot about Josh Caddis, the tight end down at Kentucky. He's got he didn't play in week 1, upgraded the probable today at the bottom, 3,500. He's a guy that I could see. He's a top recruit, had some big games last year. 3,500, he's kind of a sleeper. So just put him in your value bin and let's see.
The tight end sleepers, we have them on this show. I love it. All right. As we teased at the beginning of the show, Iowa State, this is not a game that you're going to want to target. This is not the game that you're going to want to go all in on at all. Definitely not. Low-scoring environment. But there is one play that I'm intrigued by, and it's mainly a pricing play, and that is Iowa tight end Luke Lachey, who at only 3,800 is their number one option. And they'll go to him early and often. Because he's so cheap, he doesn't even need 100 yards. If he gets you, 6 catches for 78 yards and a score, that will easily smash value at 3,800. So he will be my target out of this game. But other than that, I will be very little to no exposure.
Yeah, I mean, Abu Sama is interesting at 5,500, but he left last week's game, and just only interesting from the standpoint of if he was going to be the bell cow that we expected and get upwards of 20, 25 carries, he could probably go for 18, and that's a really good. But I don't know with the injury, so I'm 35.5 is the total on this one. So you can understand why we're not overly excited. But yeah, I like your play with the tight end there. I was always, I mean, you think about George Kittle, there's some real good tight ends that have come out of Iowa.
Iowa probably is tight end you these days.
Yes.
All right. Well, we got Baylor, Utah. This is my favorite game environment in the afternoon. I think this Utah team with Cameron Rising back is very interesting. People may have forgotten how good Cameron Rising is. He was close to a Heisman finalist a few years ago. He can get it done with his legs. He can throw it, and he has receivers to get him there. The tight end Queeth is a stud. I think he have 3 touchdowns last week. He'll be the target in the red zone. 6,300. He can get there because of how many red zone targets he'll get. I think the guy that it's more sneaky that people might be sleeping on is Dorian Singer, who disappointed a little bit last year after transferring to USC. But he's a guy who had some big games in the past. They've been gushing about him in camp. They said he is their number one option. I think they look to get him involved in what should be a more competitive game than last week. So Singer is a guy who's going to be low owned. I'm going to look to target in GPPs.
Yeah, I love it. Utah's another one that, I have in the college football playoffs. Just, it all predicated on Cam Rising and his health, and you nailed it. Singer is going to be the guy that goes deep, that stretches the field, opens up for Queeth. So sometimes they will play apart from each other, and you'll get big games out of one, not the other. But it's not saying you can't pair them up, because you obviously can. Cam Rising threw for 5 touchdowns last week, and I think he only had 10 pass attempts. Some of that was Dijon Stanley coming out of the backfield. He had a couple long catches for touchdowns, 150 yards receiving. This is the scary part about Utah. They didn't give the ball to anyone more than I think 6 times last week at the running back position. But Stanley went for 36 points. High risk, high reward play. I think once again, 4,800. I'm willing to test him out just because they showed they want to use him in the receiving game. But other than that, it's Singer, it's Queeth. I want to play Rising. I really, really do. But that 8,900 is so much. When we just talked about King at 81, we talked about Sorsby at 8,000. We talked about Taylor Green, 7,500, Eli Holston, 65. Guys that I think can put up similar numbers, 1,000 to 2,000 less. So I want to play him. I might play him a little bit, but it's going to be low for Cam Rising.
I'm with you on that. The other one here that I want to keep an eye on the Baylor side is just this running back position. If Dominic Richardson's out, it says Pendergrass got to start, but really Richard Reese did. And Richard Reese, it was a big talent at 3,600. That is really cheap for a guy who might get 20 carries today. Again, this Utah defense is tough. It's not like it's a great environment, but 3,600 for what could be a bell cow running back is just too cheap. So keep an eye on the injury news. If Richardson's confirmed out, I will look to get some exposure to Reese here as well.
Love it. Love it.
All right. Let's move over to this Notre Dame NIU game. This is another pretty easy one. I'm not considering anyone on Northern Illinois against a pretty stout Notre Dame defense. Riley Leonard's a good player. I don't think this game is going to be competitive enough for him to be playing 4 quarters at 8,600. It just seems tough to play him there. The guy I'd probably be interested most in on Notre Dame side is Jeremiah Love. It looks to be a split backfield. Love is the cheaper option. I think he's the better player of the two. But even still, because they're splitting it, I don't think this will be a close game. It's not a smash play at all. He would just be my preference.
Yeah, no, Love's my preference too. I think he showed the explosion that we'd like to see. And Riley Leonard's interesting because we saw him get 12 rushes last week. So, I mean, if the Notre Dame's going to try and continue that type of game with him, I don't love 8,600 though. That's the problem with Riley Leonard. I don't think, 8,600. You want someone that can get you 35, 40. I don't think Riley Leonard can get you 35, 40 in that kind of offense that they run. So, I want to use him, but I don't think I will today. I think Love's my only play.
I think to your point that you're making, if Notre Dame was playing Oklahoma State today, then Riley Leonard would be like, okay, I can see him getting there, but it's the matchup for me, which is it's hard to see Riley Leonard throwing the ball in the fourth quarter in this game.
Yeah, interesting. Ethan Hampton went for a huge game, but that was against WIU, not WKU. I don't get suckered in. I mean, 5,200, put up 37, but this Notre Dame defense is really good.
That's a different beast, yeah. If he does it against them, good for him, but it's hard for me to envision him being able to pull that off against this Notre Dame.
Agreed.
All right, the last one. I actually think there are some interesting plays here in the Maryland-Michigan State game. I don't love the look of the Michigan State offense. Chiles can move with his legs a little bit, so maybe. But for me, it's Billy Edwards. Billy Edwards ran the ball. He looked good throwing it. At only 6,500, he's a dual threat quarterback. I'm intrigued by Edwards, and one of the things that makes me really intrigued by him is he's throwing to an NFL receiver in Ty Felton. Ty Felton looked fantastic week one at only 5,400. He is the one I definitely want to get some exposure to again against Michigan State this week. The strength of Michigan State's defense is up front, stopping the run. Maryland's going to be forced to throw, and I think Felton has another big day today.
Yeah, I agree. Felton had 9 targets and brought in 7 of them. So that's huge. He's just, like you said, NFL receiver. It kind of makes you like, what was going on with 2 in the last few years? And now they really got Billy Edwards just using the resources around him. I love Edwards at 6,500. He was the guy that smashed last week. And it was the Edwards Felton that got people cashed out and were the big winners last week. If you could mix them in with those other chalky pieces, you were hitting. And I think once again, they're live. I think both of them. And for me, those are probably the only 2 I'll play. I know we still got a good running back in Maryland, but if I want to smash the GPP, I can. Hemby's great, but I think I can get some backs elsewhere where I'll probably just focus on that pass-catching duo of Maryland.
I love it.
And it's cheap, right, Joel? You already mentioned 5,465. I can really afford a lot of things getting those 2.
And that's what I'm looking for, especially in GPPs. I want these guys that have these low numbers that have a lot of upside, right? Not just safe plays. And Felton certainly fits the bill for upside in this matchup. All right. Before we get everyone out of here today, we do have some pick'ems.
We do. But we have this one quick question. Would we be okay fading afternoon games? And the answer is yes, I would be, because 3 of my 4 games I'm targeting, and they're all over 60 total points, are in the morning or the early part of the day. But like Joel and I said, there's some really good the Baylor, Utah. I think we don't want to ignore Michigan State, Maryland. There's pieces there. Even a little Cal Auburn, but most of my lineups will be built with the early. I'd be okay fading in some lineups the full afternoon slate. I'm with you. But you know what I hate the most? I hate when I'm winning and I got nobody left and I just got to sweat out the afternoon. So it's a bold move.
You're right. I sometimes strategically play guys in the afternoon just to make sure I'm still got something to sweat to finish out the afternoon. But, I wouldn't even have a thought about that. I think you just build your lineups with the plays you want. I think doing so, you might end up with some lineups that don't have any in the afternoon, and that's okay. But I wouldn't make it a strategy or a thought either way.
Agreed.
All right. Well, we'll go through the pickups. There's a few games here. We've mentioned a lot of the guys we like. The first one I'm going to give out is Taylor Green over 38.5 rushing yards. I love Taylor Green today. I love this game environment. They are going to rely on him with his legs. I think he smashes this 38.5 spot. This is my favorite pick'em higher play today. Taylor Green over 38.5 rushing yards.
I think it's great. I love it. And I'm actually going to stay in that game. And I'm going to go Luke Haas over 33.5 receiving yards. Look, if we're going to pair in some of the rushing with the quarterback, what's going to open up, tight end, little chip block, and then he sells out and goes out for a catch. I think it's a really good pairing to go with Taylor Green rushing, Luke Haas catching. So 33.5, I think we could get there in 2 catches. We really could, and Haas has the potential for 5+.
I love that play as well. Smash spot for sure.
And hey, We got one check in. Did we mention Allen? But we did. And here was the key that we talked about in that Oklahoma State game. If I'm going to play Alan Bowman and he's a decent price, I'm going to have to hope that Alec Gordon probably isn't as great as he was last week, right? So I don't think, it's the Alec. You can't really go Bowman and Gordon for me, but you can easily go Bowman and 2 receivers. So, I think Bowman's in play here for sure. That game environment's fantastic, and Oklahoma State's already showed the pace. You're not as high on Bowman this week, probably just because of the pass catchers.
For me, it's just his price.
Price, yeah.
I just feel with Bowman, you're only getting there through the air. And so if Gordon's going to steal one on the ground at 8,400, I'd even play 2 Oklahoma receivers without Bowman because I think he can get there. He can throw for 300 yards, but Bowman throwing for 300 yards and 1 or 2 TDs is not enough at 8,400, which is the issue. All right. I'm going back to another game environment. We highlighted that we liked this Cincinnati Pitt game. And there's a couple of spots here I really like as well. I'm going to smash the over on Corey Kiner, Cincinnati's running back, 61.5 rushing yards, as well as Xavier Henderson over 68.5 receiving yards.
Love it. And then the other game, and that's a great game to be in. One that's tonight, Colorado, Nebraska. Dylan Raiola over 230.5 passing yards. I don't think Colorado has done much to improve that defense. North Dakota State had a real shot at winning that game last week against Dion and his squad, and they're just going to play fast. 230. I think Raiola can get there. I think we've all heard, he's got Caleb Williams in him. He's got Pat Mahomes in him, they've even said, just based upon, I think, some of his doppelganger potential. But Raiola's the real deal, and at 230 just seems like a number that I'm very willing to go over.
That seems way too low against what we saw. This Colorado defense is not good. And so this does look like a good spot and which should be a great game environment for him to go. I think that's a smash spot as well. Dave, any other plays to give out today before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, let's get there. Like I said, big week last week. Follow Win Daily Sports 6-1 on the college scene. Post bets in Discord over the weekend. I'll get mine up today for sure. But one I'm really, I'm looking at strongly and already have one bet plugged in is this Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game. I'm going Cincinnati. I think the Bearcats have some good value here. Small home favorite, 1.5, 2 you can get in some books. And we talked about it earlier. I just think the dynamic rushing game, I think Pitt had a nice game against Kent State, but they had to pull away late. And Pitt was one of my plays last week with -27. But I think today, there's value in Cincinnati. I think Sorsby can be a big factor against a Pitt D that, I think is willing to let up some points and some yards, play fast pace, and I'm just not sure they can keep up with Xavier Henderson and everyone else. I got Cincy with the small fave today. And then the other one, Joel, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. Syracuse at home. I'm going to do a little more digging, but if I can get 3.5, I think Georgia Tech's a little overvalued in the market right now. And I think Kyle McCord can pass against them. So those 2 early games, I'm leaning towards the home teams in the Cuse and the Bearcats.
The last play I'll give, I want some action in this Arkansas-Oklahoma State game. I originally was going to go with Arkansas. The line moved from 7.5 to 10, which scares me. I want to take those 10 points. That seems like a lot. I think Arkansas keeps this game close. Okay. But alternatively, what I'm going to do, I think the better play here is just take the over. I think this game has points. Maybe Oklahoma State pulls away at the end, but I think both teams score a lot of points here. So I'm going to smash the over in the Oklahoma State-Arkansas game.
I love it. We'll get these all posted up on windailysports.com. It was great again. Over 100 people joining us at times, and I appreciate that. All the comments we try to get to and answer, so feel free to keep posting them. And if you are a member of Win Daily Sports, hit us up. D. Gloeck, Draftmaster Flex inside the Discord. We'll answer any questions. But, Joel, final thoughts on today. Mine real quick. I think game environments are the key, as we always are in college, but even more, especially today, when you get 60-point totals and close spreads like we've talked about in these games. I think get aggressive in those big game environments today. Don't get too cute outside of them.
Totally agree. If you hit the right game environments, you can get a few players from those games. That's what's going to make the difference. The last thing same advice I give every week, you can only as good, especially in GPPs, as your worst player. Don't build a lineup and squeeze somebody in too cheap if you want to play, because that will kill you. Make sure you build your player pool. You like everyone you're going to play in your lineup, because, again, you can't win with a guy who completely misses.
I totally agree. It's not like, I got 3,300 left. Let me just go get this guy because build your lineups. If it has to be 3,300, take someone else out. Unless you love the 3,300, like we talked about Haas today down there and some others. But yeah, it's great. Hey, we'll be back next Saturday with another great take on college football DFS. I want to see some green screens today. I hope you share them with us. And Joel, can't wait to watch some good football. Michigan, Texas, we said Colorado, Nebraska, some great games today. Tennessee, NC State, very underrated game too. So sit back, enjoy, and we'll see you next week.